Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders. Are you looking for a way out? A way out of your country of birth, a way out of a soul-sucking job, a way out of a life that just makes no sense to you anymore? Well, you're welcome here. This podcast originates from the Borderless compound in the central Mexican mountains of San Miguel de Allende. I'm Jonathan Lockwood with James Guzman, joining us from Renunciations, Chile. How's Exosphere, James?
It's doing very well. We're about halfway through the program now, and yeah, it's been great. And great, still wonderful weather out here, beach weather. It's Friday, so everything's going well here.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's Friday here too. Isn't that something? I'm really looking forward to that.
What's going on? How have you been over there?
Super duper. The weather's getting a little bit warmer here as it does in February, but there's a big chili cook-off locally here, which I didn't think was a big deal, but everybody says they're going, so I guess I'll go check that out.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So our guest today on the Borderless Podcast, we are very happy to be joined by Roger Ver. Roger Ver has been a longtime proponent of voluntarism, the idea that all human interaction should be by mutual consent or not at all. He doesn't make exceptions for people wearing uniforms and working in buildings with flags in the front. He is most well known for his work promoting Bitcoin. In fact, I don't know whether he came up with this for himself or someone else did. He's the guy you keep hearing about called the Bitcoin Jesus. In 2011, his company MemoryDealers.com became the first mainstream company to start accepting Bitcoin as payment. He then went on to create BitcoinStore.com, the first website in the world to accept Bitcoin as payment for hundreds of thousands of items, and was the impetus for the future wave of merchant adoption. He also became the first person in the entire world to start investing in Bitcoin startups. Nearly single-handedly, he funded the seed rounds for the entire first generation of Bitcoin businesses. Welcome, Roger Ver, to the Borderless Podcast.
Thank you guys so much for having me on.
So you're in St. Kitts today, is that right?
I am on Friday here as well.
Is it?
So.
All right. So, this is going to be something like our 67th or 68th episode, and we've never really focused on Bitcoin before. And part of the reason for that, I think, is our focus, our interest is not just in simply talking about things that might be interested to our people, but in trying to bring them practical solutions to their problems if they are seeking a more international life, et cetera, et cetera. So for this interview, I really wanted to focus on the practical ways our listeners might be able to use Bitcoin. But before we jump into this, Roger, can you give us just like a minute or so here, your background? Where are you from? What did you begin doing? And what brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, so I grew up in Silicon Valley, California. I was in the technical sales before Bitcoin. Now I'm no longer a U.S. citizen. I'm living part-time in Japan, part-time in St. Kitts, and hopping around the rest of the world in between. And Bitcoin is incredibly useful for that, just from a practical standpoint. So I've been involved in Bitcoin full-time for, a little over 5 years now.
Wow. That is so much longer than me. So awesome. Now, you got involved in business. You're something, I think I saw you're something, what are you, 36?
Yeah, I just had my 37th birthday last week.
Okay, awesome. Happy birthday. And you were, before you got into Bitcoin, you were doing something else. What were you involved in, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I was selling Cisco equipment and computer memory and that sort of stuff. So I did that for the 15 years before Bitcoin with my own business in Silicon Valley that still exists and is still going on. But Bitcoin is a lot more exciting and world-changing than selling computer parts.
Gotcha. Beautiful. All right. So what I don't want to do is spend a long time explaining Bitcoin to people. I'm going to expect, if you're listening to this podcast, that probably you understand that Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency of sorts. But what I thought you could do, Roger, is just identify for us the stages Bitcoin has gone through since its creation and in what stage we are now. Could you identify them?
Yeah, I guess everybody's heard the little saying, first they ignore you, then they fight you, then they win. I don't know if Bitcoin's going to go through the same stages, but when I got involved, it was definitely in the first they ignore you stage. There was no mention of it in the media ever. Maybe once every couple months, there'd be a little tiny mention of it somewhere. everybody on the Bitcoin forums, which were only maybe a few thousand people at that point, would be so excited. Oh my God, we got mentioned in some little tiny newspaper in a small town somewhere, and people would be excited over that. And I think, for a little while they were making fun of Bitcoin, but now it's just being adopted by, everyone and everything around the world. And Microsoft, Expedia, Dell Computer, and just everything and everyone is starting to use Bitcoin because they're seeing the value in it. And hopefully we'll just skip right past and then they fight you stage.
Right. And wasn't there something that happened? I remember there was a specific event when people started referring to you as Bitcoin Jesus. I think that, when you speculated on it and it turned out very well, and then you donated a lot to, I believe, Mises, right?
Yeah, that's pretty close. So I think I certainly didn't choose the name Bitcoin Jesus for myself. I believe the way it started was, I've been really, really active, funding different Bitcoin startups and doing, different Bitcoin things myself. And I was at a barbecue party one time a few years back, and there were a whole bunch of high school kids from the house next door were at the barbecue party. And I started explaining Bitcoin to them, and, kids in high school, digital money, that doesn't sound that difficult to them. They're used to all that. And I had maybe 24 high school kids around me in a circle, and I was setting each of them up with their first Bitcoin wallet and giving them each a portion of a Bitcoin. And they were all so excited about it. And one of the adults was looking on and saw this, and they said, Roger, it's like you're a Bitcoin Jesus and you have all your disciples around you. And somehow from there, the name, I just guess kind of stuck, and here we are. But for better or worse, that's the nickname I wound up with at this point. So, okay. But another point that you mentioned though, sure. Was in, that would have been 2000 and late 2011, I believe, or maybe I'd have to go back and check the exact date. Late 2000, anyhow. The media and everybody was reporting Bitcoin is dead, Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme, Bitcoin's a bubble, this is the end of Bitcoin, because the price of Bitcoin had gone from $1 up to $33 and then back down to $10 at the time I made the video, all in the course of a couple of months. And when it was at $10 a Bitcoin, everybody was saying this is the end of Bitcoin. And I made a video and put it on YouTube, and I bet at the time $10,000 or the equivalent in Bitcoin, that Bitcoin would outperform gold, silver, the U.S. stock market, and the U.S. dollar over the next 2 years. Not just outperform them all, but outperform them all by more than 100 times. Wow. And in reality, it didn't happen in 2 years. It took about 2 years and 2 months for that to happen. So since I was wrong by 2 years or I was off by 2 months, I took the $10,000 worth of Bitcoin that I had set aside at that particular time. That at that point, 2 years and 2 months later, was now worth about almost $1.2 million. And I donated all 1,000 Bitcoins there to the Foundation for Economic Education, which is very similar to the Mises Institute for people that are familiar with either of those. And I did that because I wanted to thank them for publishing all these books and articles and things that allowed me to understand how important Bitcoin was going to be when I came across Bitcoin in my own life.
That's great. Are you able to, Roger, estimate how many people are currently using Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question. It's almost like asking how many people use email.
Right.
Like, obviously, there's more people using email than Bitcoin, but we don't know the exact number because there's no central email company. And it's the same thing with Bitcoin. There's no central Bitcoin company, so we don't know the exact number. But I think somewhere, in the ballpark of 5 to 10 million is a pretty reasonable guess.
Really? Wow, that is like so much more than the Federal Reserve was saying. I read a report not too long ago by somebody creating it for the Federal Reserve that was estimating, now this may have been a year ago, I think, where they were estimating that there are presently at least 100,000 people using it. But the one thing they did say is that it appears to be doubling every 8 months. Have you heard that figure?
Yeah, it's pretty clear that that's the case. So the world's most popular Bitcoin wallet is one called blockchain.info is the website. And they've been adding over 100,000 new users every single week. They added more than 500,000 new users in the last month alone. So that's a pretty impressive growth rate there.
Yeah, I guess so. No, not every company, or store or whatever accepts Bitcoin. But we keep hearing how the numbers are growing. I imagine since you're so close to it and so in touch with it, you know more than we do. Are there some really big names in the last year who've come on board and are taking Bitcoin?
Yeah, at this point, almost the question is what can't you buy with Bitcoin?
Really?
So we have Expedia.com, Microsoft.com, Dell.com, Newegg.com, Overstock.com. I mean, there's just more and more sites all over the world that accept Bitcoin. So if you're an international traveler, you can book your hotel anywhere in the world using Expedia.com and pay directly in Bitcoin. And now there's a whole bunch of Bitcoin-based credit cards as well, where you can pay the entire credit card bill directly in Bitcoin, and then you can use that credit card to, spend your Bitcoins anywhere that credit cards are accepted. So at this point, you can pretty much live your entire life off of Bitcoin if that's what you want to do. Wow. And I know a number of people that they earn their entire salary in Bitcoin, and for quite a while now.
That's amazing. Fantastic. I did not know about that. Okay, so let's talk about wallets. For people who are not familiar, you keep hearing about these Bitcoins. We're telling you it's a decentralized digital currency. So the concept of a wallet is not an actual wallet, but it's sort of a virtual wallet that you have online. You said that the largest one is blockchain. That's my wallet. Is that the one you recommend the most? And if so, why?
I actually recommend that people test out multiple different wallets and see which ones they like, and don't keep all your Bitcoins in one wallet either, just like you wouldn't keep all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. And over at Bitcoin.com, we have a whole list of a bunch of different wallets. So anybody that's new to Bitcoin and been hearing about it, hopefully this is the day for you to actually make a wallet and get involved, and you can head over to Bitcoin.com, has all the information there, and you can choose as many different wallets as you want.
Right. I mean, the thing, I discovered Bitcoin. I don't think I even heard about it until 2012. It's funny, a good friend of mine, a Canadian who lived in Phoenix where I did at the time, who at times identifies himself as a socialist, but he's a very sort of technical guy. He began talking about just the elegance of this Bitcoin, and he kept telling me about it. And he just thought I should know about it. But it wasn't really until I landed. I was hanging out in Chile for a few weeks in early 2013, and I ran into Tour de Meester. I imagine you know Tour, the Belgian.
Sure.
Yeah, and he was really, really talking about it. And I hadn't met anyone by far who knew as much about it as he did. So he got me set up with my first account, and we began watching it. That was the time it just began exploding, and it was really, really exciting. So I got into it. And of course, I got involved with Mt. Gox, which has been quite a fiasco. Can you tell us what happened with Mt. Gox briefly, just so that people understand?
Sure. So Mt. Gox was a Bitcoin exchange, but unfortunately, lots and lots of people were using it to store their Bitcoins as well. And unfortunately, somehow, some way, Mt. Gox lost everybody's Bitcoins that were storing them there. So something on the order of 600,000 Bitcoins were lost by this company. So the other piece of advice I give to everybody is, if you're going to use Bitcoins, keep them in a wallet in which you control the Bitcoins. Don't trust anybody else to hold your Bitcoins, just like you wouldn't trust anybody else to hold a pile of cash for you, especially not some stranger on the internet that you've never met and don't know anything about. So keep your Bitcoins yourself in your own wallet.
Right. Sounds good to me, because they got 2.14 of mine. And I occasionally get emails talking about some way that you may get some pennies on the dollar or pennies on the Bitcoin or something like that. Is that the case? Do you think that's dead, or is that still happening?
There's 200,000 Bitcoins that are being held by the liquidator over in Japan, and I'm sure they'll wind up eating up most of that in liquidator lawyer fees. But maybe someday some of them will wind up being dished out. But I'm not holding my breath, and I don't think you should either.
Yeah, I got you. I'm not. I've moved on. So now what about the best ways to buy Bitcoin? Because you can buy and you can sort of appropriate them by purchasing them from individuals. What are your recommendations about some of the best ways to buy it?
It really depends on which country you're in, to be honest. And over, again, at Bitcoin.com, we put together a whole little guide there that shows all the different places in different countries around the world that make it easy to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah. Roger, I saw you speak a year ago, and you mentioned a website that allowed you to buy discounted products from Amazon.
Yes.
Purse. And if you bought it in Bitcoin, I'm sorry?
It's called Purse, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so I thought that was very interesting. Are there any other specific opportunities that people might be able to take advantage of, right away that are available on with Bitcoin or maybe some other cryptocurrencies that people might not know about?
Yes, so I'm absolutely in love with that website, purse.io, www.purse.io, because it allows you to buy, as you mentioned, absolutely anything you want from Amazon and get 20 or 30% off on every single purchase. So I've been going crazy buying all sorts of computer parts on this website and saving a fortune on every purchase. But it's also a really good opportunity for entrepreneurs. You can go on this website and buy popular products like iPads or PlayStation 4s or whatever, and get maybe a 25% discount off of the normal Amazon price. And then you can turn around and sell them in your local Craigslist or your local neighborhood for just 5% less than Amazon. And for most people, for most people, yeah, they're ecstatic to get even 5% less than Amazon. And you can, the products are shipped directly from Amazon, brand new in the box. You get the receipt and everything. And all you have to do is pay in Bitcoin, and you can get these huge, huge discounts. There's another great service as well. I don't know if it works in Mexico or Chile, but it definitely works in the US and UK and Canada and Australia. And this allows you to get a 20% discount on every single purchase at Starbucks. And what I think another great business would be is set up one of these Bitcoin ATM machines right next door to the Starbucks with a big sign that says, use this ATM machine to save 10% at Starbucks even. And then you can have, as the ATM machine owner, charge 10% over the spot price of Bitcoin. But all the customers still, even if they're paying 10% extra on the Bitcoin, they're saving 20% at the Starbucks. So they're saving 10% on Starbucks. You're earning 10%. Like, everybody's happy. It's a win-win situation for everybody involved there. And that's a website called foldapp.com. And that's actually built into a couple of different Bitcoin wallets as well, including Airbits is one. And I think there's a couple more that are in the works. So the website for saving 20% on every single purchase at Starbucks at a bunch of countries around the world is a foldapp, foldapp.com.
All right, thanks for that. So I've had Bitcoin for a few years now, and I'm presently I'm mainly buying them through Coinbase, and I do transfer them to my wallet. But a sticking point for me has been, there have been some things that I've found. You know, for instance, I'm currently purchasing metals in Singapore to be held there. That's been very convenient for me. It's much more convenient using Bitcoin than any other way I've found. But turning Bitcoin into cash, I'm still not sure how to do that. What are some of the best ways to make that happen today?
So the fees can add up a little bit, but there's a bunch of these Bitcoin credit cards that are listed over on bitcoin.com, where you can get the Bitcoin credit card. You send the Bitcoins to fund the credit card, and then you can go to an ATM machine and withdraw, pieces of paper cash right from the ATM machine that you've funded with Bitcoin through this credit card. If you just want a normal bank wire, there's tons of different exchanges. Coinbase is a great one. There's a bunch of other ones listed on bitcoin.com that allow you to sell your Bitcoins for dollars or euros or pesos or whatever currency you want. So,
well, I'm going to look into that. I mean, one of the things about Bitcoin that people appreciate is that there's a certain level of privacy, but I'm not sure if you still get that level of privacy if you have a credit card, no?
No, with the credit, although to be fair, I just got my credit cards recently. They don't come with any name on the credit card, so they're I think they were MasterCard, not Visa. But anyhow, there's no name on the card. It's just the credit card number and expiration date and that sort of thing.
But you do have to go through an approval process, and they have all of your information, correct?
Right. Although I imagine at some point the secondary market is going to pop up pretty quick, where people order these cards and they provide all their AML documents, but maybe they're not American and they don't care or something like that, and then they'll wind up selling those cards to people in America or someone else. I can't imagine that sort of thing not happening at some point.
Me too. I mean, for instance, I've begun to sell artisanal mezcal here in Mexico, just locally, and it looks like, we've got interest in the United States and everything. But my contact is just a guy, he lives out in the Campo out there, way out in Mexico. He doesn't like bank accounts because he's not, all of a sudden one day somebody comes in and takes a fee out and he gets irritated by them. And I kept thinking, man, if there was some way I could just send him Bitcoin somehow, I could give him some sort of a card. But anyway, it sounds like the good news is I'm sure there will be things like that coming in the future. So
yeah, it exists in some countries. So for example, in the Philippines, there's a service from coins.ph is the website, where you can send Bitcoins to them, and then they send you a text message with a PIN code. And you can go to any ATM machine in the country there and just put in the PIN code into the ATM machine and withdraw your cash just like that. So that's pretty darn convenient. That's in the Philippines, but I'm sure things like that will be coming to more and more countries around the world pretty quickly here.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Roger, what about local Bitcoins? Would you recommend that people use that site, or meet up with people, maybe on Craigslist or something like that?
Yeah, and it's fine. It all depends on what people are comfortable with and what their goals are. So local Bitcoins is great. I've used it myself. Another fantastic service. That's the nice thing about Bitcoin is there's just so many different options for people. So everybody has different tastes and different wants and desires, and there's likely a service out there that fits what you're looking for.
So there's been a big issue here. It seems like in the last month or so, in particular, I've been hearing about it. It has to do with Bitcoin scalability. So can you just explain for us what that means? What's the problem?
Sure. So the reason Bitcoin's so exciting is because it can't be censored and it can't be controlled or shut down by anyone. And the reason that's the case is because there's no central server that's controlling Bitcoin or keeping track of who has what Bitcoins, or, determining who's allowed to open an account or who's not. And the way that's accomplished is by having this ledger that keeps track of who owns what Bitcoins. But instead of it being a normal ledger that's on, one computer or one server somewhere, that ledger's on everybody's computer around the world that's running the Bitcoin software, including the one that I'm talking to you guys on right now. But that software currently is set up so that the maximum update to that ledger is 1 megabyte every 10 minutes. And what's going on now that we have somewhere around, maybe 5 to 10 million people using Bitcoin, doing several 100,000 transactions every single day, is the amount of transactions that you can fit in that 1 megabyte every 10 minutes is getting right up to being the maximum amount. So what lots of people on the internet want to do is increase that update's maximum size from 1 megabyte every 10 minutes to 2 megabytes every 10 minutes. And then instantly we can have twice as many people on the Bitcoin network. What some people are afraid of is that means this ledger for the Bitcoin network called the blockchain will become so many gigabytes that people won't want to run the software on their home computers anymore. Oh. And then there'll be less of these Bitcoin nodes around the world, and then it'll be more susceptible to government control and interference and that sort of thing. And I think they have it actually backwards. Like computer hard drives and memory and bandwidth and everything is getting faster and faster every year and better and better. And if we're limited to only maybe 10 million people being able to use Bitcoin, you're only going to have some set of that number of people running full nodes, which is the entire, keeping the entire ledger on their computer. Whereas if we increase that to 2 megabytes and then 10 megabytes, then maybe even bigger from there, we'll have room for a whole lot more people around the world to be using Bitcoin. And then some subset of this much, much, much larger number will be keeping a copy of the entire Bitcoin ledger on their computer. So I think we'll have a lot more computers around the world with a copy of that. It'll be a greater in terms of absolute numbers, but maybe a smaller percentage of the people that are using Bitcoin. But anyhow, there's been lots and lots of arguing on the internet about what the best way is to scale Bitcoin to allow new users. And the part that I think has the most people the most frustrated is that unfortunately there's a particular guy that controls a number of the websites that are the most popular for discussing these sorts of things. And he's been censoring anybody who's posting a position in favor of increasing the block size.
Great.
So it's one thing to debate something openly and give your reasons why you don't support something or you don't agree with something. It's another just to delete anybody from being able to post anything that advocates an opposing position. And unfortunately, that's what's been going on for quite a while now, and it has a lot of people feeling really upset over it, and actually led one guy who was a really talented developer to actually quit working on Bitcoin. He got so upset and frustrated by it. And I can understand. It's upsetting to have really good ideas or want to be able to state your position and not have it even be allowed into the discussion.
Because of this type of thing, I hear the opinion a lot where people say, Bitcoin may not be the cryptocurrency that wins in the end, but we definitely have the blockchain, which is a great invention that's going to live on. What do you think about that position?
It remains to be seen if Bitcoin is the end all be all winner at the end of all this. But right now, it certainly has the most developers and the most stuff and the most businesses going on with it. And second place isn't even close. But at one point, MySpace, second place wasn't even close to MySpace, and now nobody uses MySpace. And I bet really young people never even heard of MySpace at this point. So we'll see what happens. But in my humble opinion, I think the smart move is to increase the block size, the maximum block size, or the maximum update to this Bitcoin blockchain every 10 minutes. And a new project just launched actually today called Bitcoin Classic that'll do exactly that. And it's being promoted on Bitcoin.com, and a number of other websites are promoting that. So if people feel like inclined to participate, you can head on over to Bitcoin.com or BitcoinClassic.com and install that. And that's what I'm running on my computer at the moment.
Yeah, I want to talk about the blockchain in just a minute here, widening things out just a touch. But, when you talk about this issue that has arisen about scalability, it makes me imagine, I imagine a person, a sort of a big government, a sort of a statist person saying, see, who's going to make this decision? Who's in charge? Who's going to work this out? How does this play out at being decentralized as it is?
There's not a clear answer to that, and I think that's why there's so much arguing going on the internet. But on one side, it does make it difficult to upgrade and improve the way Bitcoin works, but it's also one of its greatest strengths, because that means that some outside party, like some government or statist, can't just come in and point a bunch of guns and make something happen either. So it cuts both ways, I suppose.
Great point. Great point. So yeah, we're going to talk just a minute, a little bit more about the blockchain to make sure that people understand that that is sort of a big picture kind of umbrella. And we also want to talk to you, Roger, about your experience renouncing and some of the things that happened as a result. But right now we need to take just a moment and give some attention to our sponsor. Today's Borderless podcast brought to you by the Condescending Group, where you know their slogan, "We care more than you." And our friends at the Condescending Group want you to understand that they're not being arrogant about this. Believe them, the last thing they would ever want is a form of violent communication that places themselves above anyone or anything else. It's just their position that they were born with hearts that are larger and souls that are older. And don't misunderstand, but in a world of ugly capitalists and nasty white heterosexual males, they must assume this position of preeminence in order to fill the world with deliciously warm and positive vibrations. A message that you don't have to be accountable for yourselves, and an absolutely Bernie Sanders-like disregard for old-fashioned, unnuanced concepts like the future and mathematics. So to wrap it up, our Condescending Group pals want a world that is open, loving, and free. This world is inevitable, so you'd better listen to them or you should expect to be eviscerated and bludgeoned by the power and strength of their bitchy might. Go to thecondescendinggroup.com now to learn how to be more loving like them. The Condescending Group, they care more than you. All right, we're back to the Borderless podcast. We're talking to Roger Ver, and he has very concisely, I imagine he's done many interviews, so he's able to cut right to the chase, get right to the point about how we can make Bitcoin work for us today and the things that we may expect to be coming soon. But let's talk about the blockchain, because the blockchain is a concept that Bitcoin rests upon. Is that how you would describe it? Is there some simple way you could explain it to people?
Yeah, the blockchain is the ledger that keeps track of who owns what Bitcoins, but instead of it being on that one computer somewhere, it's on everybody's computer all over the place. And all these computers manage to stay in sync with each other. And if anybody has a copy of the blockchain that's different from all the other copies out there, the rest of the network says, hey, no, yours is wrong and you better fix it or we're not going to let you participate. And before the invention of Bitcoin, computer scientists and mathematicians thought that it was impossible to create something like this. And the inventor of Bitcoin figured out a way to do it. And everybody, even Bill Gates has said, this is amazing. So everybody that's into this sort of thing, when they realize what he managed to create, is just like, wow, what an incredibly, wonderfully useful gift to all of humankind that was created in the form of the Bitcoin blockchain.
Right. Anybody thinking that they can get away with something, well, that might be the case if it were one ledger, but not many, many thousands of them all over the globe. So are there other applications presently using the blockchain?
Yeah, there's just all sorts of amazing stuff that's going on. So one example is, in the old-fashioned days of before Bitcoin, you had these things called public notaries where they would verify that somebody signed something or that some document existed. And that wasn't very efficient. Whereas now there's all sorts of cool services where you can embed in the Bitcoin blockchain, which is this public ledger of whatever document or whatever signature, or pretty much whatever data you want. And you have absolutely indisputable mathematical proof that whatever particular document existed at a particular date, in an exact particular form, and there's no room for disputing what the content of that is. And some people have actually described like the beginning of the Bitcoin blockchain as like the true beginning of recorded history, because before that, who knows what books got altered or what was changed later or deleted or modified. Whereas with the Bitcoin blockchain, once it's written in there, it's there for forever, probably until the end of the internet, at least.
Yeah, Roger, I think this is such an important thing for people to understand what you're talking about. The implications are we can't even imagine. And is there any book or video or something like that you would recommend to people that might want to learn about all the implications of the blockchain and what this might mean in the future?
Yeah, I absolutely am a huge, huge fan of YouTube. And anytime I want to learn how to do anything, I head on over to YouTube and I Google what I want to learn. So I enter what I want to learn on YouTube. And there's just so many mind-blowing, exciting videos over there. So go head on over to YouTube and start watching some of those after you're done listening to the podcast.
In what areas do you see this expanding? What specific areas that people will be utilizing the blockchain?
Yeah, one area I can't wait to see happen is let's get rid of the DMV. and let's have all of the car registrations recorded on the Bitcoin blockchain, and then you don't have to deal with all of the other nonsense that's going on, at existing DMVs around the world. And we can have a much more reliable, secure, accurate record that works in every country in the world as well. And that's just one example. You can do the same thing with property titles or land titles or that sort of thing. Pretty much in any time you need any sort of record, the blockchain is just an amazing tool to be used for that sort of thing.
And that just blows my next question out of the water. I was listening to some kind of a podcast or radio show not long ago, and there was kind of a critic of blockchain. I mean, he didn't want to be seen as a critic, but he kept coming in with these little snippy comments like, well, as many people believe, the blockchain is a solution looking for a problem. So the implication was that there's something very elegant about this, but, there isn't really any big problem right now. There are already established, trusted systems in place. How would you respond to that?
I'm sure horse and buggy makers said the exact same thing about the first automobile.
Exactly.
Said, we already have horses and carriages. Why do you need this loud, dangerous machine to haul people around? The horses do just fine. Right. So I think it'll be just like that.
I would say, yeah, but let's move on. I think that a lot of people, especially listening to our podcast, are going to be interested in your decision to move to Japan and renounce. And I think a lot of people have heard about the difficulties that you've had then getting a visa back in the United States. And I know that you also set up a company which was helping people get passports in St. Kitts. So first of all, maybe we could talk about some of the reasons that you decided in the first place to renounce your American citizenship.
Yeah, so I had a little bit of a run-in with the federal government and actually did 10 months in federal prison way back in 2002. All the details are up on my website at rogerveer.com for people that want to read about that. But the super short version is that I sold store-bought firecrackers on eBay and didn't have a permit to do so, and ran for California State Assembly as a libertarian at the same time. And those two things are not a good combination. But anyhow, all the details are there. The moment my federal probation was ended and I was allowed, I left the country. And I felt that I had been treated so unfairly that I didn't ever want to live in the U.S. ever again. At that time, I had looked into renouncing my U.S. citizenship, but unfortunately, it's really expensive and a lot of work, to be honest, as well. And I didn't have nearly as many financial assets at that point. So I just figured I'd live outside of the U.S. And it wasn't until much later that Bitcoin came along, and I realized I really had better renounce my citizenship now, just because who knows what the laws and regulations are going to wind up being in regards to this amazing technology that I can't help but get involved with. So anyhow, I started the process to get citizenship somewhere else. I'm incredibly thankful to the people in the government of St. Kitts for allowing me to become a citizen here. And my only regret in regards to renouncing my U.S. citizenship is that I didn't do it sooner. It's a big, big step, but if you're not living in the U.S. and you don't plan to live in the U.S. ever again, man, what are you waiting for? It's only going to become more and more difficult. They're raising the fees. They're making the paperwork more burdensome. They're making the exit taxes more burdensome. If you're contemplating renouncing your U.S. citizenship, I think you should hurry up and do it sooner rather than later.
This is such a big subject. When my friends and I of like mind get together and talk about this, the one thing it seems like, especially people who are my age or a little bit older, they've got lots of kids back in the States. And they keep getting this idea, I want to do it, I want to do it, I want to do it, but what happens if I do it and they don't let me back in? And you actually experienced that, didn't you?
I did experience that, but I think, and according to my lawyers and other people that I know, I'm the only person that they've ever heard of having that sort of trouble. And I think it's probably because I've just been a bit of a loudmouth in regards to Bitcoin and not being a particular fan of the United States government. And, I guess I'll take this moment to shame the people over at the U.S. Embassy in Barbados again with just how incredibly ridiculously they behaved. I brought over my application packet to them, proving all my ties outside of the U.S. that would prove that I'm going to leave the U.S. at the end of my visit. And they physically refused to even allow me to slide my application through the window for them to review. And then they literally had the audacity to claim, we haven't seen any proof of your ties outside of the U.S., so we're going to deny your visa. Which is just, that's something that you would expect out of a kindergartner, claiming I didn't see the proof and I'm not going to look at it. And because I didn't see it, now I'm going to say that there isn't any. So nana is basically how they behaved. And they should be absolutely embarrassed about the way that, these are supposed to be professionals that are paid with people's tax dollars, for them to physically refuse for me to even slide my application through the window for them to review, and then claim that they didn't see any of the documentation that would be required to approve me for a visa, and then deny my visa is just absolute insanity. So I hope one of them listen to this at some point, and I hope they feel embarrassed for the way they behaved over there.
But let's deal with that,
Yeah.
okay? What happens in that moment? You're in Barbados. Well, you're at an airport, right?
No, this was at the U.S. Embassy.
Oh, okay. You went there to
you make an appointment online, right, and you go into the U.S. Embassy, and then you have what's called like a face-to-face interview with somebody, but the interview is more like you hand them your paperwork, and then maybe they'll ask you a couple of questions. And the first time they denied me, I was actually absolutely stunned, because I have it in writing. Like they denied me because they basically were claiming that I had secret immigrant intent, which means that I plan to secretly move to the U.S. and live as an illegal immigrant, which is just absolutely insane. And that really caught me off guard, that anybody would ever try and claim that I just went through all this time and effort and money to renounce my U.S. citizenship. I hadn't been living in the U.S. for 10 years. And then they claim that now that I've renounced, I intend to secretly move back to the U.S. and live my life as an illegal immigrant. It's just, I don't know what sort of insane person could possibly think that was the case.
That's hilarious.
But for everybody else like that I know, they haven't had any sort of a problem getting approved for a visa. And then later on, I applied for a visa again at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo, and it was no problem. I was approved on my first try there. And the only reason I didn't apply there sooner is because the waiting line is like multiple months to get an appointment over there, and I'm pretty busy traveling around, so I didn't know if I was going to be there several months later when the appointment date was. But anyhow, most people don't have a problem getting a visa to go to the U.S. after they've renounced, and I don't think and I know another guy that's going to be renouncing this month, who's in his 60s, and he has lots of family in the States still, but I don't think he'll have a problem getting a visa to go back either.
So, interesting side note, Barbados is the only country I've been kicked out of, so maybe it has something to do with the immigration or people there. I don't know, but mine was, I had a problem with the actual immigration people in Barbados, but anyways, that's
those Barbados fuckers. Anyway, so we've dealt with that. Now let's talk about so the decision to renounce. When you do that, obviously, in most cases, I mean, other than our friend Glenn there in Paraguay, who has no statehood, I guess. What you have to get it. You have to get another citizenship somewhere, another passport, right? What are some of the best options you think that exist right now for doing that?
There's quite a few options in the Caribbean, and those are the most reasonably priced. So you have St. Kitts, you have Grenada, you have St. Lucia, you have Antigua, Dominica is another. So there's quite a few all in the Caribbean, and then there's some much more expensive options in Europe and other places as well. But I think the best bang for the buck is probably in the Caribbean at this point. But I only have experience with one. But I'm incredibly pleased with the St. Kitts passport. You can go to pretty much the entire Eurozone without any visa being required. You can go to Hong Kong, Singapore, Korea without a visa. You can go to all the other countries here in the Caribbean. It's a pretty darn convenient passport.
All right, good. So that's citizenship by investment. Then, of course, if you have obviously by heritage or ancestry or something like that, that's just not an option for me. Then you can take a little bit more time. And, I'm looking at Panama right now as being the best option, although it's a 5-year wait, and who knows what it'll be like after 5 years. That's been my concern.
Yeah, the world is changing very, very quickly.
Right.
So hopefully one day it'll get to a point where we don't have to deal with these nonsense of, your papers, please, before you go from one piece of dirt to another on this rock that's hurling through outer space.
The blockchain solves it all right there. So, James, there's a question James likes to ask everybody who we have on. James, what is your question for Roger today?
All right, Roger. Yeah, sure. If there's a person that you're giving some advice to, and they want to maybe leave the United States, or they want to start their own business, what is the single best piece of advice that you would give that person?
So there's two questions there. One, if you're considering start your own business, my advice is absolutely do it. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. And the nice part about it is you can actually do it at the same time. If you have your regular job, start it at the same time, and don't quit your regular job until you're confident that your new business that you've started yourself is headed in the right direction and taking off. As far as leaving the country and renouncing your U.S. citizenship, you can dream about it all day long, but if it really is something you want to do, get up and take action. Like, nothing's going to happen just by thinking about it. You have to actually take action.
Yeah, reminds me of Simon Black. He kept making the point, this should not be an emotional decision. If it is, you have to get to a place where it's not emotional anymore. So, good advice. Thank you very much, Roger Ver, the Bitcoin Jesus, for being our guest this week on the Borderless podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on.
It was really great to have Roger Ver on. I think he was a great guest, and I thought that he had the most concise answers, I think, of anyone we've ever had on this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is the first guest, I believe, that we've gone in depth about Bitcoin. A lot of people ask about it, cryptocurrencies, blockchain, this type of stuff. It's, very exciting and kind of a controversial thing. So, I'm waiting to see what kind of reaction we get. I'm interested to hear what the audience thinks about Bitcoin, if they like it, if they don't like it, if they're planning on using it, or if they have been using it. I think it definitely has a lot of interesting applications that you can use as a location independent or an entrepreneur abroad, and in the types of things that we talk about. So that was great talking to him about that.
And it was interesting to talk to him about his renouncing too, right?
Yeah. Well, this seems to be a trend that's going on. I just shared this article that came out once again. This was the article specifically was in Newsmax, but they talked about it on several different magazines. But this one was the Treasury record numbered renounced U.S. citizenship, green cards over tax laws. I mean, this is something we've talked about. We continue to talk about because this is just a trend that's rising and rising, and it looks like says here a record-breaking 4,279 individuals decided to call it quits with the U.S. in 2015, in comparison with 3,415 people the previous year, according to a U.S. Treasury report. The underlying cause behind the massive increase in renunciations is believed to be the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, which came into force in 2010. The law imposes harsh penalties for noncompliance, even if people aren't dodging it on purpose. Andrew Mitchell, an international lawyer who analyzes their stats, told the Wall Street Journal. Okay, and it goes on here, but yeah, I mean that's the point. Is a lot of people, especially if they live and work outside of the United States, like Roger Ver was talking about. If you have a United States citizenship, he doesn't, and you don't plan on going back, he doesn't understand why you wouldn't be running over there to renounce. So
right, yeah. So the statistic comes out that in 2000, the previous year, 3,415 people renounced their citizenship, and in the most recent year is 4,279. And
right.
So to me, you know what these things remind me of, really, and maybe people will identify with it. You may or may not agree with this philosophy. There was a woman, a sort of philosopher that I used to listen to some years ago, and she used to make this claim. She said, nothing you want is upstream. She was recommending downstream. There are things that make sense for you, and going in the way that makes the most sense rather than fighting the tide or fighting the flow of the river. And that's what people are discovering. And there are always these powerful people in life who start to lose control, and they think the best thing to do is squeeze tighter. Yeah, well, this is what happens when you squeeze people tighter. And I have to imagine, when we talk to Glenn, what is our friend Glenn's name again?
Glenn Roberts.
Roberts, yeah, who renounced some time ago. I think it was at least 4 years ago. When we last talked to him, he said his name hasn't even shown up on the list. So probably these numbers are an indication of people really renouncing a few years ago, potentially, and there may be many, many more in this past year.
Well, I found out something interesting. Now, I don't know that this is true, but I did hear this from a tax lawyer, and he showed me where in paper. I'm not sure what exactly the paper was, but they are required to report people that renounce, and the way that it was worded. I mean, this is in legalese, but he explained to me that the list, the name and shame list, or whatever they want to call it, of people that have renounced, that is actually covered expatriates. So that is people with a net worth of $2.5 million or 100 and something a year.
Right.
And those are the people that that's on the expatriation list. So a vast majority of the people that renounce don't come anywhere on that list. So
right.
That's something interesting to think about. I think that would make a lot more sense as far as these numbers.
Right. Yeah, I guess that would make sense then. So we had a webinar. How do you feel that went?
We did. Yeah, speaking about all this stuff, we just had a very a great webinar with Michael Menzies, who we had on the podcast 2 podcasts back, and two podcasts back, and we went over several things with some of the new laws. It's just coming on tax time, so him and his office, they've gone over all the new regulations and things like that, and they shared a lot of interesting things with us, answered a lot of questions directly, and it was open for a few days, but now it's in the members area, and I think it was pretty good, for our first official webinar. I think it went pretty well, and I'm looking forward to continuing to do things like that.
Right. So for me and you, the point of this, the Borderless Society and, the Borderless podcast is to really be trying as hard as we can to provide something that we believe you guys think is of serious value. And so I found Michael Menzies and his expertise of serious value. It's why after more than a year of deep research into, who would I get to help me make the right decisions? Should I go offshore at this point? If not, at what point do I go offshore? And what are the various strategies I can engage in to minimize taxation before that time? I found this guy to be the most approachable, the most informed, and the best equipped to help me make those decisions. And so if you're like me, and it would appear from the data that we get on the demographics of people who listen to the podcast, you are, then you should find Michael Menzies. If you didn't listen to it, join the Borderless Society. It's in there. Check it out. I think you'll find it of great value.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that we're not talking about it that much anymore, but please, if you enjoy this podcast, then, please give us a review on there and we'll read that on air. We used to get a lot of reviews in the beginning, and we used to mention this every podcast, but, right. We still are willing to do that. So also, if you go to borderlesspodcast.com, if you're not on the mailing list, you can take the free quiz that we've put together there, and that'll also, you can sign up to get all the free updates that we get. So make sure you don't miss these live free webinars and things like that, and all the podcasts that come out. So please do that, and, we'd love to have you as part of the group.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, and lots of more webinars are planned for the future, and another Borderless podcast will be coming up soon.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.